Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
All right, so my name is Kari Frazier. I am the host of the Detroit is Different podcast and the Detroit is Different, community group, the movement. That's kind of my whole concept and my thing. So make sure you please follow Detroit is Different. If you're unfamiliar with what Detroit is Different is, it is a hub to talk about the Detroit stories and cultures that add to the tapestry that make Detroit unique in what it is. So unlike, I guess you would say, traditional journalism, though I partner with some traditional journalist institutions of Riverwise Magazine and also Branch Detroit, Detroit is Different definitely is more along the lines of what would be considered editorialized. But as far as I'm concerned, it's really what's real and from the heart. It's what I've seen. It's what I've witnessed. It's the people around me. It's the mix of culture. So this is going to be an open discussion where we're going to speak to many different things. And when we speak to many of these different things, connecting to what social justice looks like in our lifetime, going beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion, it definitely gets outside of some of the safe spaces where, you know, it's just a mark and something that would check box that would check in just because, you know, it's like we don't have enough of this amount of people in a room. We're really going to have a discussion about, you know, how things can shift and really social justice. When I think of some of the anchors in it that I've looked up to, these men have definitely made strong waves. So without any further ado, furthest to my right is Dr. Carl Taylor. Dr. Carl Taylor has spent a lifetime, as far as I'm concerned, really from an academic perspective. Many people may look to him and say to him that he's ushered in a balance and perspective on some of what's happened to communities like Detroit. And many communities with black folks mirror what's happened in Detroit for generations and decades. So that's from an academic standpoint. From a standpoint of community itself, from the streets itself, he's actually given some more perspective and context to what the news, what media, what others that have no idea what this experience is like, and not make it look so animalistic, not make it look so out of context, really just finding a balance of what street life, gang life, what criminality and the conditions that create this to be a reality and a response to these desperate and deficit-based thinking and mindset. So, Dr. Carl Taylor, please give a round of applause for Dr. Carl Taylor.
Not much to say after that. I can't live up to that introduction. Thank you, Karen. I have to say that from a distance, I'm a big fan. I follow your work.
Thank you.
Both your podcast, but in particular, a lot of your film and pictures that you do. They bring a perspective that's more humanistic than what a lot of people want to think about. I'm just elated to be here. Found out that I've been knowing Mama Aku, that this lovely dwelling is named after, and my brother and I, Virgil, that we grew up on Hazelwood and 12th. And I'm old, so I was here before the riot. And so I'm glad that Bunchy Yusef has taken the role that he has. I remember what this house looked like before, and a lot of people may not. And so this is a testament to him and all the people that he works with. Where's Steve? Is Steve gone?
Oh, I'm hanging out.
You're hanging out. My hat's off to Steve also for heading up a very distinguished organization like Michigan Roundtable and stepping to the table, because there's not a lot of folks that step to the table from that side of the fence, and that's important. And of course, I have friends and people that work with me at MSU, Daniel and Denise and others in here, so I hope you mingle with them, because both of them have a wealth of knowledge and experience in working in urban centers. But it all comes back to, how long ago was that? I was at Henry Ford after a murder of a student, and I was given a speaking. It's the only time I had, what's that when you get dizzy? Yeah, vertical. Thank you. I had vertical for the first time. I didn't know what it was, and that's when I met him. And I didn't even think I was blowing him off. That was the very first time I'd ever met him, and he had wrote this tremendous book of his life experience at that young age. And finally, I got back to East Lansing. I began to read it that night. I think I called you that night or the very next day. I'd finished it in no time. I love reading. And it was a gripping book, but more gripping was the relationship between myself and Yusef. He has never turned me down for working with graduate students, homeless folks, or whoever. That's what. And just a little bit ago, we had Chief Anthony Holt, who's the vice president and the police chief over Wayne State. And I was laughing because Yusef was on another side at one time, and then there was Chief Holt, and Chief Holt spoke so highly of him. So we're looking forward to doing the podcast and talking about our work and writing together. So that's all I have to say. I'm grateful and humbled to be here. This house is a testament. This is really strong. And naming it after someone that's been in the field, in the trenches, says a whole hell of a lot in 2022. When you consider what else is going on in this nation, we have to have this type of fire. If not, people forget what's happening.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. Give another round of applause for Dr. Taylor. Also, some was given already to Yusef. Yusef is so much of a friend to the community, but when we think community, it is Zone 8, the namesake of what be known as, like, we call it the tribes or the streets, but the gang, Zone 8, the gang, this zip code, 48208, as we know, the footprint. His mother that recently passed was a big cohort of here, and his whole family, grandmother, and so many other people that run this community and connect with this community. So you're sitting in what is legacy, what is history, but along with that history, you find out so much more, as what Dr. Taylor spoke to is Yusef's first book, Window to My Soul. It's a must read. It is very transformational. It talks about his journey, leaving the time he spent just as a child growing up, and the time he spent incarcerated, meeting his father while incarcerated, just really building that connection, and then what it takes to that steps towards redemption, but not only redemption, what community activism and organizing looks like beyond. And it goes back far. You're witnessing that now. So now as he sits in this position, engaging with more organizations, especially working with the Roundtable, a different view and a different lens of what diversity looks like in a space where usually it is academicians and many other people and theorists and psychologists and sociologists and anthropologists or cultural anthropologists. It's rare to have someone with the experience that's not necessarily being studied upon, but that was studied upon, that actually lived the experience, to be in this space, to speak for and advocate for people in this position. That's Yusef Bunchy Shakur. Yusef Bunchy Shakur.
I'd like to say what up, though?
What up, though?
I'm the son of Ava Joe. I'm a native of Black Detroit. And as my mother would say, Yusef must find his mama Kua. That was our inside joke. Carl talked about our meeting, right? And so when Kari talks about diversity and inclusion, that goes beyond just black and white. It also goes within the dynamics of black folks as well, right? So for me as a young author, young activist, young organizer, just green all the way around, right? Just trying to figure it out. And prior to that meeting, I had just sat down and watched the American Gangster story of the Chamber Brothers, and I grew up in the shadow of that. I remember vividly when they got busted and they found that videotape of them passing out dollars, and they showed that like the rapper 50 Cent, when he finally did his debut album, it was Get Rich or Die Trying. But for us, that was the moment to get Rich or Die Trying, when you saw that vividly and whatnot. And so to meet Carl and to embrace me, and it was more before physically, it was intellectually. Listening to him describe the way he saw Detroit through this lens of what he identifies third city, And for me, it's third neighbor. Like you have the third city, and then the morphing into the third neighborhoods, and being able to be a product of that, and me coming up to him and giving him my book, and because you got aspirations, and how many people really embrace you. I mean, take the time, and that was beautiful. Like he didn't have to call me the next day. And shortly after that, him and Al came down. We went to Dave's Soul Food. We ate, and then he blackmailed me after that, man. And, don't cook me them ribs. If I'm coming out, you gotta have some ribs. Some beef ribs. But during that journey, most folks would say like I identify myself as an unorthodox leader, and what I mean by that, I didn't come up any traditional way, and I had to figure it out, like my mother figured it out. And for the greater good, this is who we are, and I'm a product of that. And he's embraced that. Sometimes it's been raw, sometimes it's been mistakes, whatever it was. And we've always been able to have private conversation and even public conversations about challenging, about growing, about engaging. I can even remember how I met Mama Cool. You're like, well, you cuss a lot, don't you? You gonna tone it down. But that's the thing about me, what most people don't realize. I was raised by my mother. I was raised by my grandmother. I still say yes to this day because I can remember my grandmother smacking the hell out of me if I say yes. No, that was a mandate. And understanding, even though I deviated and got in the streets or whatever, those principles, those values was always there. It was just a matter of coming back home. And when I came back home, they flourished into helping me be the man I am. But Carl's like my W. Du Bois, and that person, and the way he writes, the way he talks, and the way he speaks, and just he didn't have to embrace me, but realize how he embraced me, embraced a lot of us in that same way, and so the foundation of I am and pursuing my own PhD is and being inspiring through him and whatnot. So it's an honor and pleasure.
Definitely give a round of applause for Yusef. All right, so in usual Detroit is Different forum fashion, we're going to have some discussions because I always have a bunch of questions. You ever meet me, I'm going to have questions for anybody. I meet your 4-year-old grandson, nephew, whatever. We're going to have a conversation the same way if I meet somebody that's 90-something. That's just the flow of Detroit is Different style. Now, with that being said, I'm going to kick off some of these questions. Then we're going to go to the audience for some questions, all right? I like to speak directly to my Detroit is Different audience. My Detroit is Different audience, as I said, it's everyday folks. So let's break this down in definition too. So diversity, I think, when it's heard from my everyday people, a lot of the people in my neighborhood, they think that, okay, that could be a gateway to get a job if I'm a black person. So if this is what has been interpreted as the definition, how do we need to define that for those people in the community so it's more empowering than just looking at an employment opportunity alone for a place that clearly probably ain't welcoming black folks in the first place? So this could be a Carl or Yusef response. And really, I want to get both. So we're going to start with Yusef. He already leaned up. So Yusef, please.
No, I mean, as black folks, we know we're oppressed, whether we understand why we're oppressed, that we've been locked out economically and politically. So we have the intelligence to be able to see certain things. So the language is the opportunity, but is it changing the dynamics? So again, if I haven't eaten and, if I see you as an opportunity, I can go to Whole Foods and eat for the day. I'm gonna take that opportunity to go to Whole Foods, and also the opportunity to experience something new, to experience something different. Again, everybody, in particular, coming from poverty, and for most of us, we didn't even know we are in poverty, right? Our parents was great in that fashion of clothing and protecting us from that, but the opportunity to see something different, and I think, that's what changing the dynamic of diversity inclusion to racial and social justice. That is a method, but it doesn't necessarily get to the root cause of the dynamics. And so getting to the root cause of like social injustice, like I can give you a job, but I'm out helping you to sustain your behavior and changing the mentality within your community. Because the reality, folks that we know, young folks, I'm speak specifically in the guys, okay, I might make a couple hundred, may get to 1,000. This I can flip this. This is, and it's a genius thought process, right? But it's still working against yourself. And so this is where, again, diversity and inclusion can open up opportunity, but it's not the opportunity to also sustain you from a racial and social justice point of view of dealing with the dynamics within your community that put you in that position in the first place.
Definitely. Dr. Taylor, when you think of that practical definition of diversity and how it permeates through our community, what that means. Like I just spoke to Yusef, and I was saying, yeah, it's definitely getting a job, but along with getting a job, and you're in the academic world at Michigan State, so it could be there too. It could be being the black face.
I would rather not talk about
the
academic world because, no, seriously, it has not been, it's still in the middle of a great battle within itself. I will put that on the second round. The first round, the initial thing to me is diversity. We have to look at the diversity within ourselves, in our families, and our neighbors. And so I came up in a neighborhood that we didn't think we were poor. We didn't even think about that. But we were community property, my brother Al and I. And that if the neighbors needed something, and our neighborhood in the early age was integrated. My next door neighbor was Catholic, had no children. Mr. Goss and Mrs. Goss. Mrs. Goss had the crazy garden back in the day. I'm sorry now to say to my mother in heaven that I get it now, but my mother would get joyful. So, oh, summer's here. We're going to have garden, dinners, and I mean, damn. Because Al and I didn't want we wanted to eat. And she said, we don't need no meat. No meat? What? You got to do a hot dog or some bacon or something. But my point is the diversity is with ourselves. I worked for, no names, but I worked for a medical doctor who lived in my neighborhood who treated me, and he was black, he treated me like a damn servant boy. He sat in his big window on Boston Boulevard and had me rake leaves, let his brat-ass kids tear the leaves back up and told me to go back and rake the leaves again. They were sitting there like, leave it to Beaver. I like the Beaver, I'm not knocking Beaver, but he would let them do whatever and did not allow me and reinforce, you don't come in here. You go to the side of the house. Now, mind you, I went out to Grosse Pointe and raked leaves, and my dear father, I had to tell the lady that I wanted a drink of water, and she told me, what? Well, you go over there to the water holes. Then I had to go to the bathroom, and she said again, what? So that diversity has to be trained. I look at Brother Daniel and some others. That diversity has to be that there were men and women on my block, but in particular men who worked in a plant, made good money. Some of them were managers and so forth, and they gave money for us to have Little League Baseball. We had women there who baked or barbecued and raised money for us. But the other end of the result for y'all is that things have changed. We need to, you can't go back, but you need to reconstitute the pecking order in a positive way. That education was critical. Our folks valued education. They value reading. And I know now the young ones are teaching me a lot. I understand the pictures are magical and all that. But also, I won't embarrass her, but this is a brilliant woman from Pennsylvania who's an attorney. And we were talking about in Pennsylvania, in a small town, how she worked with diversity, both black, white, but class-wise also. When you think you better than folks, and that includes the church. You go into the church, and if you ain't wearing the right thing, Al and I had a big laugh. My mama finally got on the board of directors of the church. I love my mama so much. I said, trick that, man. I did. I said, trick that. And then Al, you got on the board because I started clocking big dough. And I was putting big money in, and when they passed, that's not what we're talking about. The diversity has to be because I care about you, because you're smart. I had a wonderful talk about bad doctors. Dr. Charles Whitten, who was a sickle cell researcher. Charles Whitten was the absolute one of the biggest influence in my life. At 10 years old, I was a safety boy at Roosevelt. Dr. Whitten was the shit. He came up and he stopped me and he says, Carl, how are your grades? I'm 10 years old And he treated me like I was his colleague in the hospital. I said, well, they're pretty good. He said, now, Carl, he didn't dog me. He said, Carl, we've got to get excellent grades, don't we? Yes. Okay? Mr. Gaylor was the janitor in Roosevelt, was a musician that night. He was a trumpet player, a great trumpet player. He took my brother, who was 5 years younger than me. He had a pink Cadillac, and at Roosevelt, Mr. Gaylor came out from his janitor duties to man that driveway when the teachers were coming in with their cars. And he took Al, my little brother at that time, he's not today, but he put him in the car in the winter. So what I'm saying, diversity means something different to me. There's different versions of diversity. I would not have reached out to Yusef if Dr. Whitten, and I got to pay him back, he cried. I had a pinch hit for the great Marion Wright Edelman at a speech in downtown Detroit. And, oh yeah, she did the foreword on one of my books. That's my mama. But when they told me that I had a pinch hit for her, I said, that's like asking the bat boy to go on for Jackie Robinson. But Dr. Whitten was in that office, and I looked at him, and I said to him, and I meant it. At 10 years old, he told me I was important. At 10 years old, he told me I could learn. At 10 years old, he demanded, Negro, you little Negro, you're going to learn to read. I have expectations, but he didn't dog me, not ever. So when you say diversity, I think we have to reestablish how we define diversity. And it's not simply the diversity that's the buzzword in corporate America. Although, Steve, where are you? Still here, Steve? Steve does a hell of a job getting out there taking licks that he doesn't have to take. We need that diversity, but I think we have to go back and trade in on our diversity of helping each other.
Thank you. Which leads naturally to the other two letters in the DEI, the equity and inclusion, that I want to combine together. Especially when I think of, like, recently, as many people know, finished my master's journey at Walsh College. Walsh College is a business school in and around the Metro Detroit area. It's probably one of the most conservative institutions you're probably going to find in Michigan. So it would be unique that I would be sitting and debating even the need for what reason equity and inclusion have for balance in a space that's only driven by profit, and really the transactional profit that capitalism leads to. And this, let me be clear, this grotesque form of capitalism that has always been American capitalism. So equity and inclusion, as I said, it should feel different. And I like that Dr. Taylor just spoke to really community, spoke to community solutions, and not just always seeing things from a corporate lens. But it's very difficult in America because the makeup and the framework of what most of America is designed from that corporate lens. Some people speak to capitalism. I say it's designed for white men that own businesses and property. The further anything American gets away from that, the more it's probably not designed and it's going to function for you. Just because that is the origination of what America has always been. But the equity and inclusion, it looks different. You know, some of the things I used to say is I should be able to go to a job interview and I should be able to start breakdancing and they should hire me. And then a white person be like, well, shit, I can't breakdance. And it's like, well, that's how black people feel just even walking into certain institutions. I work on so many community projects and they'll, be in the Renaissance Center. And I'm like, I have to pass like 6 security guards before I even get to talk about my community. That alone breaks down and puts me in a different perspective as a black man. So the inclusion is maybe you need to walk past 10 liquor stores with dudes with sagging pants and do-rags and stuff. And then we can talk business. So it's like for inclusion, it has to have some type of cultural competency. Equity has to have some type of cultural competency. The things that we identify, that we connect with. So it gets out of that lens, as we say, of that white male. And that white male is more than just like the specific white guy. It's the ideology. It's the ethos that we take on in itself. So when I think of equity and inclusion, it's like equity is the balance. Inclusion means we're going to include you in what this balance looks like. What is equal? And this is the question that I have that I'm going to position to Dr. Taylor first. Many of my heroes that I look up to. The one I've known and had a relationship most was Chokwe Lumumba, rest in peace, the attorney and mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, upon his passing, but also one of the leaders of the Republic of New Africa, attorney for Assata Shakur, Mutulu Shakur, Tupac Shakur, and so many others. His work transitioned more towards human rights, and then that started transitioning a little bit more towards social justice, is what Yusef spoke to, and this metamorphosis of what equity and inclusion looks to. This also took place with Kwame Ture. This took place with Dr. Martin Luther King before his passing. It took place with El Haj Malik El Shabazz, or as most of us know, Malcolm X. This transition towards looking at more balance and less, I guess, just the direct fight of equity and inclusion seems to take place around social justice with many people that work in movement efforts. Why is that such a common occurrence? And then also, I forgot, Grace and Jimmy Boggs are that too. Why does this transition seem to happen as people commit further in the work of the movement towards equity and inclusion and social justice needing to be a part of that, Dr. Taylor? I know.
These Negroes have set me up. That very I know him and Yusef probably. Let's get him like this. Let's get him like that. I cannot argue with anything you're saying. I will add another dimension to it. I think when you speak of capitalism and the greed that we're seeing and experiencing right now, unfortunately, depends on how you're defining white man, because I think China right now and Russia and other nations are very guilty of being dogmatic and brutal and ruthless, and they will participate like there, and a lot don't know, but in Russia, they have a oppressive force going against Muslims in a region, not just a little city, but in a whole region, thousands of Muslims. So I rely on, Al and I grew up in a black Muslim barbershop, Brother Jesse up on 12th Street. I'm not a Muslim, I'm a sinful Christian raised. But I will say that Elijah Muhammad meant a lot to me. And I think that a lot of people, I would take with that mentality of being greedy and a capitalist to the extremes, because I don't think capitalism has to be ruthless. It does not have to be, but it is. But when you say the devil, there's a lot of black devils and a lot of yellow devils and red devils and all kind of devils. That's a mindset. And also, let's not leave out the fact that it's homophobic, and it is also against women, the misogyny that of women. So that devil wants to control every damn thing. And I have to say to you, I don't think that devil's interested in equity ever. To hell with that. I think you have that manifested quite well with Donald Trump. I mean, we see the ignorance, and how do we talk to our children? How do I talk to a boy out there on the block about doing anything with a cat? And then you talk about, I'm sorry, Yusef and I had the honor of having the scholar Ta-Nehisi Coates here. Was it about 10 years ago or 8 years? Or what?
7.
7. We were right around the corner here. We was on. And so we had a bid, and I said, well, look at January the 6th, 2021. You call it whatever you want. You look at July the 23rd, 1967. I was 17 years old. You killed them folks. You killed them, you murdered them, you put them in prisons, you put them under prisons. It's the same thing now when I come into Detroit. I'm looking at all the dope houses. Y'all don't call them dope houses. It's pure green and all this bull. It's still capitalism at the expense of others. So you have to be careful, I think, when you say, I think capitalism is the brunt of it, but it's the greed and the ruthlessness that you'll do anything for the money. And the ironic twist is that the same people that talk about pro-life are the same people that starve people to death, don't want to have them on welfare and these so forth. So I have to say this, Steve may not like this, but I'm not in an academy. I belong in an academy. I'm there. My brother always has to slap me and tell me, you do belong there. Because I'll be saying, I get my feelings hurt. And nobody listening to me. They don't want to hear the theory. And sometimes I say, trick your theory. Then I said, Brother Daniel over there really got me about, 2 months ago? I was deep in the valley of depression, and he said, Doc, you got to let loose what you do. And he's correct. We have to do this. So it's not the capital. They're not going to stop. Right now, you look at gas is what? I mean, seriously, I come out of this city when it was 22 cents a gallon. What I do know, my brother always reminds me, Negro, we're not going back. They're right. But it's going to have to become some type of compromise. That's the word I would use, some type of balance. You say balance, it ain't got nothing to do with goodwill. They certainly are not, Trump shows that. And then, to make matters worse, we have armies in this nation of white supremacists who are hiding behind religion. We're Christians. You're not Christians. You fake. You're terrorists and so forth. So I don't think that you can depend. I think what we'll have to do is have to put them in positions that we're negotiating, we're compromising, but that's why I believe in him and these young guys. You don't need to kill each other, and you don't need this weed. We don't need the weed. I'm sorry. Everybody, you do something else. I'm disappointed. I'm not going to name any names. We don't need to be asleep at the wheel. We have suffered enough for that. Find something else. The same thing. One day I came in here, I was just laughing. I was over there. Janice brought me in, and I'm looking at, we were going through Pontiac, and we saw it said, liquor, lotto, and tobacco. It's a big, brand new place. And I said, and there lies our capitalism, our death, and we come out on the short end. So we have to do change, Carrie. I think we have to do change. And you and Yusef are very powerful with your lens and your voice that you got to teach the young ones. So what happened if everybody didn't go to the dope house? Same thing, they took all my people in with the lotto. That was my number, man. Cigar box, nickels and dimes, and now you got the lotto, and first you lied and said you was going to give that to the schools. Then as soon as you started giving it to the schools, then you said, oops, we're not going to give you that other money that we were giving you before. It was never meant to be that. This is just game. And so you can't keep telling young people. So that's why I'm listening to young people, but it's a balance. They got to listen to old heads too, and I have to listen to them. That's what I said. So when you ask that question, I don't think that's not a good question, but they ain't thinking about trying to make this right. They want to think of how they can make more money. And look at Trump. He just beat all them people out of money. And their racism is so deep, they don't even give a damn. You can take my money. You can do this with women. And, they got Obama for wearing a beige suit. And I was through with everything when they found out that he was a misogynist. I saw some ugly woman. I usually don't say things like that. I don't know, but some ugly woman, she had a shirt on, and she said, you can do something with my private parts all you want, Donald. She had it drawn on her shirt. I'm like, what kind of whole stuff is it? That's whole. I'm sorry. So I'm saying the mindset, you got to counter that mindset, and you have to get the young ones. Because some folks are lost. They ain't coming back. Okay?
Yeah, same question, Yusef. And thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you. In that balance between equity and inclusion and social justice, it seems to be a movement towards that. Even I would put you in that category of someone that, as an organizer in community, that has opened up the lens of what you feel that work looks like. Why does that work transition with so many people that are in these movement and community works?
No struggle stays the same. It's always growing. It's always new information. You're dealing with new individuals. So you think, say, I'm 40. I'm 49. So if we go 60 years, the struggle wasn't about equity inclusion. The struggle was about freedom. The struggle was about liberation. These were some of the terms, and we could think about others, right? And over periods of time, because of what this capitalism, white supremacy, the system that you're dealing with, you make compromises, or you develop new phrases to how to engage. Again, after 9/11 in particular, the word militant now is like the evil, like Carl talked about the devil. We grew up where Kwame Ture, who we know as Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, Malcolm X. These was names of Shakur, Angela Davis. How many women from that era wanted the afro because of Angela Davis, right? And that visual and whatnot, and the shift, the changing of the guard, but the changing of the guard is the changing of the language as well. And sometimes, and we all have faced it, whether white, black, or green man or woman, where you code switch. And I think like the language of equity and inclusion is also part of that code switching. Now there's some principles there that you're fighting for, but do you lose the base of what you're talking about? And also again, when we look at like King could be considered in that equity and inclusion movement, but that wasn't the language. And where Malcolm was in the self-determination, that we have a right to defend ourselves. And so there always been a way of looking at the struggle different and describing, but we don't have enough conversation amongst ourselves. Say it has to be an either or. Why it can't be a both and? And at the point where it's about to get to a both and, Malcolm gets assassinated, King gets assassinated a couple years later, because of the fact they don't want us to see it the same, but also we don't create enough think tanks in our community to have these conversations. At a school level, everything is about philosophy, everything is about ideology. And even we don't realize that, but we don't realize that there's an ideology that's governing us, whether it's imposed upon us, and even to the point where most of us get our information from the news that we don't even support, but then we'll say, where do you hear that from? Or even now, I Googled it. How often are we actually reading? We're actually studying, practically things that we learned from our past. I mean, for myself, going to prison, entering, or I had a third grade reading level, not because I was dumb, I couldn't learn. I was caught up in the streets. But I was. My education on the street level was college, because I knew how to get through what I had to. And so if I didn't see opportunity that way, but sitting down, and then once I understood what it meant to be black, it was the different language. But then, like, for my struggle in meeting Carl and others, is how do you navigate these different worlds? You look at this house and you see the images. We know these are not everyday images that we see. This is by design. This is by intent. And many of us, again, we're just going to talk about like black people, right? If we ask the question, how do you define black? We're going to get 20 different definitions of that in this room alone. But the question is, how are we having a conversation to harness that into one definition? Because like when we hear James Brown say black and I'm beautiful, we forget the movement. The folks on the ground influenced James Brown to make that song. It wasn't like he just woke up and this is who he was. He wasn't like Donny Hathaway or Curtis Mayfield, so to speak, who kind of gravitated to that. And so the more that we can have conversation about these terms, the better we can begin to define it. And they're not against us, but the question is who framed them. And if they're not framed in a way for us, then they can work against us.
Thank you. And as we think about like that dual world, that dual reality, it's in many facets. Definitely being black men, it exists. W.E.B. Du Bois, as you spoke to earlier, wrote about that. Souls of Black Folks. Richard Wright, Black Boy, wrote about that. Even carried on in the Native Son, writing about that, and many others. But if this is that space, when you do find that platform to advocate for your experience that's different than others, how do you find that voice to welcome what that social justice looks like, to usher that in? When you are the black person, it could be something as simple as, living in a community with white neighbors. It could be going to school and you're in a parent association. How do you offer that balance, offer that lens, offer that perspective? As you said, it's like two different worlds where your person is respected, your culture is respected, and you're not capitulating to something that you don't agree with, something that is not of you, not of your essence. How do you do that, Yusef?
I mean, for me, equity starts with our first understanding. So me as a person, me as my community, there's a history there that's produced and already manufactured some level of equity. So again, like coming to this community, many people have different perspectives, many ideas. And first thing, if you're old enough and older than me, you remember a different time frame for this neighborhood. It brings back different memories. But to be able to bring folks here and be able to engage in that, but also like, it's not bad as I thought it was. Like there is something positive going on despite all the negative. But the unfortunate reality, that negative has become our narrative. That negative is not what we created. That negative is a product of de-investment. That de-investment has led to gentrification, which have led to us losing over 50% of our population. That's led to Henry Ford Hospital being the largest narrative of this area, while the absence of those folks who are 3-4 generation here, as if that doesn't matter. That started with equity there. The equity starts with the doors on these ceilings that represent the people who have left. Represent the beauty in the community where Doug and them was trying when they was tearing down the houses. Because first people were asking like, where you get the doors from? I said with no hesitation, we took them out the house before Doug and tore them down. Here's that creativity, here's that ability to invest. I mean, this, if you saw, as Carl mentioned earlier, if you saw this house 8 years ago, you probably would have put it on the abolishment list as well. And some of them did deserve to be torn down, but there was those, same with this, and we invested. We invested some love, we invested some time, some care, and what does this tell to people in our community? As my older homeboy told me one time, our folks in the neighborhood is like a dying flower. And every time we do something, it's that water revitalizing that flower. So that's what's so significant about being able to do an annual backpack event right here on the street, and be able to connect those dots and advocate for folks who see themselves in you. There is no separation. So to Carl's point of the diversity within ourselves, we've lost that ability to connect. And again, we all learn evenly. We all have different career choices, but we all still facing the same dynamics, the same challenges. So that's the umbrella that we function up under that connects us when we don't realize it.
Thank you. Same question to you, Dr. Taylor. When you are in that position and you can be representative of your agency, your people, your culture, your background, your experiences, in a space with faces that don't look like yours, that don't understand what that perspective is, what's the best way to engage and welcome them to who you are?
For me, the litmus test is always being honest and straightforward. That I connect with any and everybody, even those who don't agree with me, by respecting them and saying that I respect you. This whole issue of like we're dividing it up is secondary to me. It's the fact that if I meet somebody and we may not click in one way, but we always click as human beings, even those who are fierce and have been hurt. A lot of our children have been hurt, I'm finding out. A lot of this miseducation about sexuality and everything. I remember my mother saying to me one time, I was laughing, and she said, be nice to the girls, we catching hell. That was my mother talking to me. And that meant everything to me, so it's the connecting, the humanistic part of it. Even when I meet people, I try to be patient. And I have to tell a quick story about me and Yusef, and he ran into some people that were foul, and I can see the years of difference over a 5-year period. And the first time, he's ready to just get down, get that ass, ready to go. 5 years later, same type of negative, racist, classist, all that stuff. Now Yusef, and today it's a whole different story, but now he is more willing to embrace someone and to negotiate and to work. He's not going to be compromised his dignity. But whereas before, so with other young cats, because they don't look at an old guy like me with gray beard and all that, they look to him. And now he's getting a little old, so they don't have to look at Karen. So the young cats, you got to teach them to be part of a new mindset. They have to have a new mindset. This killing each other is just stupid. And we're not saying anything about it. We got to go along with it. This racing the cars, acting like, and everybody's acting like they're in Mad Max to me. We got to tell our children, like what my mother told me and my brother, I told him he was pissed at me. we were talking about the ride with Ta-Nehisi, and I'm like, we didn't get to ride. May looked at us and said, where you going? And then me and Al said, we're going up on 12th. Everybody's getting shit. And she just looked. Negro, you get back up here on this porch because that's not what we do. So you can take it any way you want. So I think that's what's the most important thing, is that communications and compromise and follow-up. These young ones have given me a lot. They're driving me absolutely nuts. They are. I'm not lying. I'd say something to them, but they come, and Yusef has been part of that. Janice, my brother, everybody's saying, my brother just lives with me. He's in my heart. He said, Carl, you 72 now, Negro. This is different. Daniel, another Denise, they're different. But the one thing, if I sit on the sideline and let them do what they're doing, then I'm just as guilty as the white supremacist anybody else. And if they get pissed at me, too damn bad. Wrong is wrong. Ain't no wrong in 1975 and wrong in 2022. Now this devil will tell you it is, and he will use this little talking thing. I was laughing on this. I had a little girl, I had this watch on, a little girl in my class, beautiful little African-American co-ed, and I'm lecturing and I look and I said, what's wrong with you? She had this scared look on her face. She said, I gotta breathe. I said, you gotta breathe, what? She said, my watch said I'm not breathing. I'm like, damn, baby, you breathing? I mean, it's come to that. It's no, seriously, there's too much dependency on this technology, and it's taken over. And now I have to double check everything, our text out and all that. So I think we got to go back to fundamentals. We, don't live like it's 1940, but understand that the things that made us strong. I'm talking about all kind of people. I'm talking about Polish people, city chicken. I did something terrible to a Muslim brother. A little Polish lady made me some city chicken, and I knew it was pork. And I told Negro he's a Muslim and he didn't eat no pork. So we eat, and he said, damn, Carl, this city chicken. What is city chicken, Carl? It's pork. Well, I'm just saying, he had a fit. We're learning all the time. And I think we're not doing that. And now I got the young ones telling me something. They don't know a damn thing. They really don't. They need to know all of it. They need to know more. So I'll rest. I hope you ask your folks something, because I'm going to be gone soon, because I won't live here.
Let me ask something.
Yeah, and
say something real quick.
Okay.
So Carl keep referring to that day when we was with Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? And during that time, we talk about equity. There was a dog walking across the street, and it had his meal in his mouth. Some dead carcass.
It was a cat.
A cat, yeah.
I ain't never seen nothing like that in my life. A whole carcass of a whole cat and 3 dogs and the one in the middle. And I told him, Ta-Nehisi, that's how bad things are getting. The weeds are coming up through the Stewart in the alley. I mean, we're getting overtaken by nature. And yeah, so I did yell at you.
But the point of it is how we all saw that differently. And understanding, so again, in the community, that was part of his equity, that was part of his meal, being what was left, right? And being able to, whether we agree with it or not, how do we make sense of that? And that's the dynamic that we all face with.
That's a good point.
And we all enter this situation from different points. But the more we can have a dialogue about it, the better we can create a better understanding how to address it and come up with what we say or would like to perceive as the solution.
And thanks. That really is part of it. It's opening up. And I know as Dr. Taylor, it's not so much time, but I want to open the floor for any questions and responses, because now is that time. We're at about 48 minutes, 21 seconds now, but let's get some questions. Let's see. And I know with questions also comes introductions as well, but yes, ma'am. Please give a name.
Semi-retired now, but I used to do a lot of diversity, inclusion, and equity training in long-term care. And one thing I found out in teaching these classes and being invited to speak, and many times I was the only African-American in an all-white setting. But what I'm finding out in my travels, in my research, and working with all these different ethnic groups, is a word called accountability. And what's happening is that we're not making people accountable for their actions. Now, I'm gonna make it real simple and plain. Jews need to call out Jews, and the evangelicals need to call out the evangelicals. Because one of the driving things today, he was talking about Trump, but evangelical is one of the main driving forces today. White evangelicals are racist. There was a guy from Alabama, he came on the air and he said, I used to be an evangelical for 30 years, and my dad also. But now with this new Trump thing, it's not the same thing anymore. They're driving this racism and evil in America. This is a white man calling out another white man. We gotta be accountable to ourselves and say, this is not right. And then we got to call out our brothers and sisters. Same way we see kids selling the drugs, hurting each other. White folks ain't in here coming in our hoods, tearing down our houses, killing each other. I know they're killing us, but there's still, it starts in the home. We got to be accountable. We're not accountable. Jews, like Bernie Sanders. I like Bernie Sanders, I'm a big fan of his, but he's one of the very few people in America will call out the Jews and say, yeah, we have 15 Palestinians, 15 Israeli soldiers killed. But what about the 150 Palestinians you have killed? Nobody won't do that. Calling them out. We got to call each other out. When you're wrong, you are wrong. If we're not calling each other out and making each other accountable for what we are doing in our own communities and to ourselves, we got a problem. And then the backdoor talk. See, a lot of people talk different in the house. And then when they get outside, it's a whole nother animal. What's going on in the house? Like I told a lady today, people aren't born racist. People are raised to be racist.
Yes.
It's the truth. But what is going on in the homes? Black folks we gotta be accountable to ourselves, and then we gotta be accountable to each other.
Amen.
We are not making people accountable for the bad things that they do. Police officers, they got to call each other out. You know you got a bad cop, your partner a bad cop. You know he killed that black person, but you quiet.
That's right.
No accountability, and then you become complacent. And you tolerate. There's a saying, evil prevails because good men do nothing.
Take that.
And there's a saying in the Holocaust Museum, even at the gates of hell, evil men can't change their ways. That's how evil they are. But you got to be able to call it out. The reason why it was rising so much in America, nobody's calling it out. The evangelicals know that this ain't right what they're doing. Beth Moore, strong, talented Southern Baptist, pull out a Southern Baptist and say, this ain't my Jesus. They talking about another Jesus. I can't be part of this political thing. We got to call each other out. When you see people doing wrong, don't get quiet. Call it out.
So with that, I'm gonna just reiterate some of your comment more so to the audience that's listening without the mic. So Ms. Chapman has worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion training for
I am a chaplain.
Yvonne Warfont has worked in training for diversity, equity, and inclusion for years, and her comment was speaking directly to the accountability of different people in groups that make up the diversity of the groups, holding one another and really personal accountability and one another accountable within that. And that solution, especially when we speak of some of the change in tonality, and I guess I'm one to think that nothing's really new under the sun per se. I think that the media has changed the perspective and made people feel as though Donald Trump stirred up more racism that already existed. But like I say, from going to Walsh College and looking at the NFL owners and looking at the owners of most of Detroit in an 85% black city, but about 90% white ownership, I would just think the only difference is Donald Trump was on TV saying what probably is in many of these back rooms as well. And then, you know, this is also a unique day because it's being recognized as recognized for Juneteenth. This is like a national holiday now of what ended the physical enslavement of many black people here in this land of America. And this is unique that this kicks things off. I don't know if you all have a comment on accountability, but you're more than welcome to.
I mean, I agree in the premise of everything that you said. As we all know, it's a lot of nuance and dynamics. Even between Carl and ourselves, you know, we've struggled with that. I remember we was at an event, and at the time it was Bean was the mayor, and I talked about how I gave him one of my books one time, right? And he looked at me and gave it back to me. And my point was, you know, we was all raised better than that. You know, whether you didn't like it or not. But also here's someone from the community that you don't even want to take the time. And most people in the audience was like, man, I was rude, I was disrespectful. And it depends on your interpretation. But and what I've learned during that period, because I've never had a problem speaking my mind. The question is, do you become the individual just the loudmouth? Do you just become the one just speaking loud just because? And folks like Yusef would say it, but it's much deeper than that. I mean, because it's a lot of wrong shit. And I want the record reflect. It's my first time cussing. Carl done cuss more than me. I mean, NAACP, and et cetera, et cetera. Again, going to your point, like we have these private conversations, but they're not. But also tied. How are we tied to these systems? You know, who's paying for things and liberalism, the good old boy system, and it's a lot of that that's going on. In this place and whatnot, and we suffer, but also on the ground level, in the neighborhoods, and even like the transition from the word neighborhood and hood. I don't use the word hood. The reason I don't use the word hood because of what it represents. A neighborhood is bad, racism, etc. However, we're still neighborly. In a hood, we've stopped being neighborly with each other, and we have to understand the difference. But we also have to understand how systematic racism has created those circumstances and those situations that turned us against each other, but it's so invisible that we don't see it. And in those dynamics, you know, grandmothers and whatever and grandfathers are left to fend off those wolves, fend off those hyenas. And this is how the hood becomes what it is. Drug selling, robbing, because this is a whole nother world that we've turned our back on. And now we're 3-4 generations looking like, because now the murdering, the raping, et cetera, as saying with white folks, is coming to our door. Now we're at an alarming about this situation, but it's always been there. And so it's easy to blame, it's easy to pick things out, but the blame has to be on all of us. And the more that we can, like when I come to the meetings, I'm always like, what are our values? What is the values that's governing how we operate and how we function? And that's the relationship that Carl and I have had. And when I've said things he didn't agree, he'd tell me, like, man, I agree with that. Woo, woo. It didn't affect our relationship none whatsoever because it wasn't tied to nothing about him making me better, I'm making him better in some form. So I think it's more nuanced and it's easy. It's easy for me to say, Wendell Anthony full of shit. It's easy to say, I think Wendell Anthony is a sellout, right? But it's more nuance to that. It's more dynamics to that, right? It's being able to break those down. Like, I think the word sellout is necessary, but I don't use it at all because it's too easy to use. And the reason it's too easy to use because we haven't really done the work to examine what is a sellout. What is like most officers, how can I call you a sellout when he just trying to take care of his job or take care of his family? However, you put yourself in a compromised position to your point where you're not challenging the system. But it's not easy. It's not easy as that because, again, to challenge the system, you got to be raised that way. I was raised that way in the sense of re-raising myself to understand how to fight against it. Me and Carl, we don't like each other because we both militant. That's not what this type of party is. That's my point. That's my point. However, we share an intellectual capacity of supporting each other.
I'm diplomatic.
I think I definitely Harrison has a point too. So I want to get two more comments and then we'll go from there. Questions, Harrison.
Harrison, as a young black man and a leader, I'm often in spaces and at tables where I'm often the youngest or just the only in the room. And I want basically Dr. Taylor and Yusef, what advice do you have me as I continue to climb these different ladders and enter these different rooms to look for? Because it's often exhausting, the different battles and what I have to fight through. We talked a little bit about code switching and things like that. But what advice would you give me as a young leader? I've been around for a while, so I know how to navigate certain things. But now, being in different spaces through nonprofit and government, now working in state government, now I have an opportunity to potentially go to the highest level. I'm up against certain battles, and what advice would you give?
All right, so I have an announcement, and then I'm gonna, I guess, preface your statement first with two things. And a point I want to pick up with Yusef's point. First off, we've transitioned in food too. I think the Caribbean food's still here, but we also have some pizza that has been provided. So make sure you take advantage of that as well while we're here. And you also have some other snacks available. All of this is compliments of the Michigan Roundtable and Mama Cool House. So please make sure you honor it. Thank you for attending and being part of this. And in that, Harrison, I would say kind of along the lines of what Yusef said. And as much as he said he doesn't agree all the time with Dr. Taylor, me and Yusef always sometimes don't agree. I think that the story of Wendell Anthony and what the NAACP represents, even from the origination further back, especially the Detroit chapter being what it is very unique. It's dynamic. I've definitely had the feelings as though like more could be done, but then I've also understood the inner workings of where that organization stands. Yesterday, the Detroit NAACP partnered with the Charles H. Wright Museum, along with the city of Detroit, and then also one of my good friends, Sharia Ayers, for the Juneteenth Jubilee celebration that took place at Eastern Market. So this is something where the gold and blue banners were waving high, and what that is versus like that call to action. It's like where that call to action, when I think of the works of what Wendell Anthony at one point in time, which was questioned by one of my alma maters of Northwestern, Damon Keith, oftentimes in their rift that they often had, it would be in the same zone, because Wendell Anthony was the one that said, Damon, you need to do more. So like what that do more, and in answering your question, it kind of starts back to what he said. What is your value set? Why is that your value set? Are you engaging with others because you feel as though this is the best to feed the group? Or is this in your principle set? Have you defined what those principles are? Are you married to those principles? Do you build it up and break it down? Because for me, I'm always doing that. I'm building it up and I'm breaking it down. Like sometimes I look at what some of the work that I'm doing, and I'm looking at about $12,000 of my own money into my own project that I think is really cool, and a community project, and I think it's dope, right? But then at the same time, some of the funding sources didn't come up. Some of my clients may not come through, but it's like, is this fulfilling to me? When the little homies on my block pull up and they say, yeah, man, you the dude that do all that positive shit, because that's how they define it, right? It's like, in perspective, it's like, this is kind of dope. The little homie look at me as the dude that's doing some positive shit. So if I end up doing some negative shit, or his own perspective of probably it's not even negative, it's you're doing what I would expect you to do, then now it's gonna kind of not be the differentiation. I have about, like Yusef, I got maybe about $80,000 worth of speakers, recording equipment, and the thing that everybody that usually I think comes from a more well-to-do background, meaning that you probably make over like about $30,000 a year, it's like, damn, you got all this shit here? You ain't afraid niggas gonna come in here and stake all this shit? I get that response, and I'm saying I get it from people that are politicians to just regular, other entrepreneurs, And I'm like, nah, man, because it's the equity of my community. It's my buy-in. Could it be stolen one day? Possibly. But would I look at that as like paying tithes to the hood sometimes? Possibly. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's the principle and the purpose of knowing that I'm going to keep feeding. My garden, the first people I give greens to, cabbage, it's my neighbors. The first, when I'm picking those green, those bell peppers, it's going to the people in my neighborhood first. As much as I interview people like Yusef, Dr. Taylor will come on. My neighborhood not paying attention to that. I interview Street Lord Rook. It's like, damn, you got Street Lord Rook on there. You know what I'm saying? You got Stretch Money on there. Oh, you knew Sada Baby? You know what I'm saying? And some of this still is agency to connect them to one day say, hey, check out this book from Yusef. Yusef gave me one of the best gifts about 2 years ago. He gave me 10 of his books. I've given out 8 of them. All the guys that I know that have been fresh out, or as we would say, just left the criminal justice system, fresh out in the hood, and they appreciate it. 4 of them read the book. The other 4 is probably collecting dust, and they'll catch up with it when they need to. But it's stuff like that. It's substantial. So I would say it's the principle and the value center, and that's where you got to lead first. And that is what matters most, because a lot of the other stuff may not come. The fame may not come. The fortune may not come. The appreciation may not come. The awards may not come. You're not going to be 30 for 30. You may not be 40 for 40. You may not get a pat on the back. Your parents going to be possibly mad at you, wondering why are you helping people that don't seem like they want to help themselves, or like the young lady, like the lady just said, that aren't even holding themselves accountable. You got to lead with love and follow that principle set. And that's my perspective to you in reference to that.
No, I don't have anything to add. No, seriously.
Only thing I would say, Harrison, as I told you privately, I tell you publicly, you have to know your own worth. And in this world, people will know your worth greater than you are, greater than you will. And if you don't know that, it will be used or misused. And I'll just conclude. I remember it was a period when I was traveling the country. I was meeting all these great people, taking pictures and sending my father. Whether it was Angela Davis, et cetera, et cetera. And he told me, like, it's great you meeting them. Just know that you're just great as them, if not greater. And I needed to hear that.
That's deep. We got, okay.
I have a question. What is accountability? Right? In Detroit, we know that we elected a mayor that does not represent us again. Keep representing people that don't represent us again, that don't look like us. So what is accountability? We call them out. Okay, call them out in the media. Elena calls them out on Facebook. Then what? What's the next step? They know, Detroit knows that Dan Gilbert is not in our favor. They know that Detroit government is not in our favor. They know that our mayor is not in our favor. Now, what's the next step?
I think it's this work. And I mean, you may call me foolish to believe it, but it's taking the arms and doing community house projects like this. It's an interest, I think, that lies within that corporate agenda. It's downtown, it's midtown, it's kind of spilling over a little bit here with the Henry Ford project connecting to Motown. But it's a lot of space and nooks and crannies that they're not thinking about. And that's what we got to do what we got to do. You know what I mean? We have to take the will of the people must be to exist in the spaces that we know are touching our hearts, our minds. You know, I'm applauding the efforts of Keith Williams bringing back Soul Day. I don't know how many people know about Soul Day over here with Pee Wee, and I'm not necessarily for as Yusef's already saying, I'm not necessarily for where Keith coming from.
On that.
Yeah, but from the perspective of what could happen and what that initiative was, because Pee Wee was walking the path of something that's of the people in the community. I think community efforts, and there's so many communities where we can engage. There's so many urban gardens that have been walked away from. There's so many houses and spaces like what's happening with Mama and Cool House that can happen everywhere. Like, if we're only focused on what Roger Penske and Carmanos and Dan Gilbert and Matty Maroon and the Ford family and the Illich family are interested in, then that's not playing to our strengths. Our strengths are the places that they're not going. Our strengths are our community. Our strengths are our people. And then it's definitely some of our people that have been co-opted. I mean, right now I want to say that Rocket Mortgage hires, I don't know, probably it's like the fourth biggest entity that hires people in Southeast Michigan. So going against Gilbert is like going against like damn near 1/4 of the workforce. You know what I'm saying? So like we have to even be smart about that and know that our efforts can rise up against that as well.
You take one more question.
All right, one more question. I think the brother in the back had one.
Dwight.
Good afternoon. My name is Dwight here. We have to change the narrative. I want to shorten this. I did 25 years in prison. I've been home 10. I've been working for 10 years. Doing everything in the community. I call myself in the trenches. Meaning that I'm not afraid with Pookie yet. I'm going to address the violence. That's one of our biggest issues across the country. Everybody from the community know Pookie. Even our activists, everybody. They're afraid to say something to him. We see him every day. That's not good. Blame anybody though. So in doing, I'm giving you this example. I did 25 years. That's my homeboy in the middle, Yusef. He was a shorty. I'm 54, a younger than me. I'm from this area too. I went to prison for being the same problem that y'all looking at today. The violence and all, that was me. No cutting no corners about it. When you see it, you see me. When you see it, you see him. He been home longer than me. I've been home 10 years. He been home longer. He went to college. He got educated himself. His story looked like the floor, like this whole house, really. The one he's talking about when he said it was the way it was before he put all this stuff together. That was his life. His name Yusef. I know him in JoJo. I know his mom. I know his sister. I know him since he was a child. So when I look at it different. My narrative is different in school. My education came from the cell. 25 years in prison, about 7 of them in segregation. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I did 20 years of segregation and I came out like this. We all suffer trauma. Everybody went to prison, suffered trauma. Before we went to prison, we suffered trauma. When I think I grew up on Wabash Ferry Park, and one of the first traumatic experience I had is playing in the dirt when they tore down Providence Hospital over there to build that
Young Manor?
Young Manor, and the guy threw a brick and hit me in the head. That was trauma. That was the beginning of my trauma as a child. Fighting on the streets, busting windows, to doing all the menacing things in the neighborhood. All these things that I use now to know myself, to go back to do deep studies of myself, to understand where I came from, what church I came from, who was my grandma, who was my great-grandmama, who was the big mama on the block, who was the people that we respected, who ran the stores, these things that we got away from. These things was established when I was a child, though. Him too. We still win. So the issue that we dealing with ain't that is different than it was then. It was never dealt with then. So we was cattle to prison, school to prison pipeline. They put a name to it, to what happened to us during that time period, all the way up until now. We use that in a capitalistic way to continue to get money. Even when we talk in our narratives, we speak of capitalism and we promote it by the way we talk about it. When you look at the men and women that come from prison, scratch that. Look at the ones before they go. Look at our kids right now. When COVID occurred, all the psychologists went flat. You ain't hear nothing. You ain't hear nothing from the preachers or nothing. They was the last ones to go remote, right? They was the last ones to have a conversation the way that everybody heard it. They were the last ones to teach the seniors how to listen and how to start corresponding with the world because they was locked in. One of the things that hurt us when we talk about capitalism is that even though it's a good thing for everybody in the country to have some money, pandemic money, PPP money, they gave all our children a bunch of money that they'll never see again in their life. They traumatized our children 3 years ago, and we're suffering from it now because nobody said nothing about don't let the kids get the money.
Dwight, I'm about to, we definitely feel the rhythm and the passion, and you dropping science. I know we just transitioned set in that program. Can we get a round of applause for that commentary? And also, I want you all to give a round of applause for this panel, this discussion that we had. Just an introduction for you all to think about. Thank you all for spending a Monday, the first, I guess, national observance of Juneteenth with us, and what the Roundtable is doing. This is a 2-day affair. So there will be programming tomorrow as well connected to the Michigan Roundtable, and even today. Today doesn't wrap up till 6. It's a lot more that will be happening here at Mama Akua House today. But I definitely want to give a round of applause to Yusef, our host, please. All right, and that's why I waited for Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor, hold up the book. Let's see. Dr. Taylor has a brand new book. His writings, it's creative. It connects. Make sure you all support. Make sure you patronize, and definitely see some of these narratives, some of the thought process of Dr. Taylor. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. Give a round of applause to Dr. Taylor. I don't know if you have an ending quote, and then we'll wrap up.
Keep on keeping on. I mean, really, that's it. I mean, really.
All right.
You said some great things, and you just need to move with it and keep it moving.
All right. So keep on keeping on. It will, as we say, today wraps up around 6 o'clock. Thank you all so much. Peace be.
Let me get some right.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today